So at this point, we've talked about some numbers. We've talked about how we found ourselves in the position that we do find ourselves in today. We've talked about some facts. And we've talked about who the Anglophone Rights Association of New Brunswick is. Now it's time to talk about why we came together in the first place, what are our concerns, and what made us decide that we needed to become a collective voice. So we are concerned about employment and advancement opportunities in New Brunswick. We're concerned about the quality and availability of education. We're concerned about the quality and availability of health care. We're concerned about heritage and cultural funding and initiatives. We're concerned about immigration, the costs, impact, integration, and logistics. And we're concerned about the duplication of services and facilities. Let's talk for a few minutes about employment and advancement opportunities. This slide shows two different sets of numbers, the first being the number of open positions within the government of New Brunswick that were posted effective August 12th, 2015. On that date, there were 34 open positions available. 20 of those were mandated as bilingual required. That's 59% of the open opportunities within the government of New Brunswick. The bottom set of numbers shows the number of job postings that were either filled or closed over a 6-week period of time between June 1st and August 12th of 2015. And again, of 131 positions, 63 of those, or 48%, were mandated as requiring bilingualism. So let's take a look at how the perceived need for bilingualism in the core public administration has changed over the years. In 1978, 1 year after bilingualism and the Official Languages Act were fully implemented here in New Brunswick, the perceived need for bilingualism in the core public administration was 24.7%. By 2000, that had increased to 35.3%. By 2012, it had increased to 42.5%. And by 2013, it was up to 42.8%. That number continues to increase daily. The next slide shows a comparison between New Brunswick and all of the other provinces and territories. And keeping in mind that New Brunswick is Canada's only officially bilingual province, and there is going to be a higher need for bilingualism in New Brunswick because we offer services at the provincial level as well as at the federal level. However, you can see that in New Brunswick, 53.6% of positions in the core public administration are considered to require bilingualism. And keeping in mind that that is to serve 32% of the population, 71.4% of whom are fluently bilingual and do speak English. Now, the demands and pressure for service in the language of choice or language of preference is beginning to impact the private sector as well. Even though under the Charter, the private sector is not obligated to comply with the Official Languages Act in any way, shape, or form, there is an increasing demand for service in the language of choice. And I'm going to show you how that's beginning to affect the private sector. These posts were taken from in and around the Greater Moncton area only because that's where I live and that's the area that I was preparing the presentation for at the time. If you look around in your own communities, you will see more and more of these every day. The first posting is for a delivery driver. You'll notice that the language requirement is bilingual. The education requirement is the completion of high school. There are no certificates, licenses, memberships, or courses required. The experience requirement is less than 2 years. You must be able to lift up to 20 pounds, and the specific skills of this position are to load and unload goods. However, in order to do that, apparently you must be bilingual. The next posting is for a building maintenance worker or general handyman. Again, it is posted as requiring bilingual. High school is the level of education requirement. Again, there are no certificates, licenses, memberships, or courses required. Experience is an asset, but not required. And the duties include sweeping, mopping, scrubbing, taking out the trash, cleaning up heavy debris, painting, washing walls and ceilings, washing windows, watering plants, and general maintenance and repair of electrical and plumbing systems. You must be able to lift up to 50 pounds in order to perform these duties. However, you must be bilingual. And a retail sales associate at a Bell Alliance store does not even have to have completed high school. They do not require any experience. They will be trained. They must operate a cash register, be customer service oriented, set up displays of merchandise in windows or display cases, process money, checks, and credit card payments, operate a computerized inventory, record keeping, and reordering system, but they must be bilingual. Now, we've seen these postings for everything from a pizza maker to an individual who will clean the animal pens at a local animal shelter. Moving on to education, we have some serious concerns around education in the province of New Brunswick. The second language education has had 45 years in which to ensure that both communities receive quality education which will meet their needs in a bilingual province. Despite this, the use of the French language has declined, and the percentage of Anglophones considered bilingual has increased by only 4%. We're concerned that failed or inadequate immersion programs are having a negative impact. Less advanced children are often being dropped from or encouraged to drop second language education because it's deemed too difficult for them. If they do complete their second language education program, the certificate that they receive often does not meet the minimum entry-level standards. Language testing in the province is inconsistent, it's not tracked, and it often does not test function and proficiency in both official languages. We've actually reached out trying to obtain numbers on language testing, and we've been told that they do not keep or track this information. However, we've heard time and time again about Anglophones who are required to pass French language testing, and we have never yet had confirmation of a Francophone who was required to complete and pass English language testing, unfortunately. I'm not saying it doesn't happen. I'm saying we haven't been able to confirm it. Adult learning is often cost prohibitive or is completely unavailable. We have heard of individuals being advised by Services New Brunswick, no less, that language training is not available in their area and that they can go to the local library and borrow a copy of the Rosetta Stone program in order to assist with second language training. And finally, the current illiteracy rate in the province of New Brunswick is 66%. That indicates that neither linguistic community is receiving an adequate or a quality education. Another concern that we have is around healthcare. If you've read or watched the news in the last year or even in the last 5 years, then you're probably very aware of the extreme state of healthcare in New Brunswick, and you've probably seen some of these headlines before. New Brunswick doctors speak out on the severity of overcrowding in hospitals, calling it inhumane. I felt like I was on Main Street. Dumont patient spends 4 days in a hallway. According to Dr. Dupuy, at any one time, about a quarter of the Dumont's acute care beds are being used by seniors who should be in nursing homes. I've seen patients die in the hallways, he said, which really, that's the epitome of not having dignity. Chalmers Hospital chief surgeon frustrated by bed crunch. People ready for nursing homes or other care are using about 25% of Horizon's hospital beds. Also among our concerns regarding health care, aside from the overcrowding, is the cancellation of surgeries. I'm sure that you've seen this in the news over the past year as well. Poor maintenance and cleanliness. We've actually seen reports in some cases of there having been safety violations and health concerns for a number of years at a couple of hospitals that have not been addressed. The lack of nursing home or long-term care facilities. The lack of assistance and resources for mental health. How many of you have heard of Stephen Robbins? Stephen Robbins was a man in the Fredericton area who was struggling. He knew that he needed help. He had reached the end of his rope and he was desperate. He went to the hospital begging for help. He spent 6 days in hallways, fracture rooms, kitchenettes, alcoves, wherever they could put him. He even had to meet with a psychiatrist in the hallway of the hospital. After 6 days, feeling hopeless, he'd had enough. He checked himself out, gathered his belongings, and left. His body was found in the river 19 days later. There are 50,000 New Brunswick citizens without access to a family doctor. We've seen and heard about the closure or reduced hours of rural emergency rooms and clinics. We've seen and heard about the reduction in ambulances to some communities. Knowing all of this, what if it were possible to save between $40 and $60 million by merging our health authorities? How much improvement to our current state of health care could we gain with an additional $40 to $60 million? How many more nursing home beds? How many long-term care beds? How much mental health assistance? Because despite everything that we have mentioned, New Brunswick operates 2 health authorities. One which operates primarily in English, one which operates primarily in French. However, both offer bilingual services. In many areas, this means 2 distinct facilities, both offering bilingual services, but managed in different languages. It also means duplicate salaries, wages, equipment, maintenance, insurance, etc. During a recorded CBC political panel in May of 2015, Minister of Health Victor Boudreau was asked about the possibility of merging the 2 at a suggested savings of between $40 and $60 million, and he said no. The reason that he cited was language, and he also suggested that any efforts to remove the dual system would end up before the Supreme Court of Canada. Previously, in September of 2014, the former Minister of Finance, Blaine Higgs, was asked the same question, and he stated we could, but it would be political suicide because we would lose the Francophone vote. Another concern that we have is how heritage and cultural funding are used. Currently, funding is granted for the promotion of heritage and culture based on the minority community. In New Brunswick, that would be the Francophone community. Similar funding and promotion is not available to the Anglophone community, except in Quebec, where the opposite is true. An example of this would be the recent large celebration of Acadia Day in St. John. St. John has a Francophone population of less than 5%. However, there was a huge Acadia Day celebration, while Loyalist Day went virtually unnoticed and uncelebrated. If you watch or read the news, then you'll notice that every week there's an announcement of funding for the promotion of Acadian festivals, celebrations, sporting events, arts, culture, etc., without an appropriate balance towards promoting and protecting the Anglophone culture and heritage. And before we move on to the next segment, I'd like to leave you with this thought. Bilingualism is having or consisting of two languages which interact or integrate with each other. Duality, on the other hand, is separate and distinct language groups, both operating individually. In other words, it's the creation of parallel life spaces. Despite being declared an officially bilingual province, we do not have bilingualism in New Brunswick.